Hey everyone, welcome to the Return of the Logos podcast, where we're attempting to return logic to a chaotic world by shining a light on the shadows. Hey everybody, welcome back, and thanks again for tuning in, downloading, and listening to Return of the Logos podcast. Today, we are going to discuss, I think, what's maybe the impetus for Andy and I getting together to do this podcast. We've kind of discussed it a little bit before. At one point, Andy had given me this, I'm going to call it a treatise. We'd referred to it previously as his manifesto, jokingly.
It's a mission statement.
It was just supposed to be a mission statement. Sorry, we don't have that clip. I wish we did. So Andy had given this to me to read, and that kind of opened the dialogue between us. I let him know, hey, I was kind of wanting to do this thing. So Andy is going to read through his treatise. I'm going to keep calling it that.
I'll probably call it a mission statement, but I think due to the context and also current events, it's probably good to ditch the term manifesto. It was really kind of a joke.
Yeah.
You know?
I think
I just didn't know what else to call it. I'd never sat down and just started writing like this before. So.
Right, yeah. I think using the term manifesto in just about any time is probably the wrong time, especially, like you said, these days with surveillance and, possible phones listening to you and whatnot. But we won't get into that.
Yeah, in that context, it's just a joke.
Right. So anyway, Andy is going to read through his treatise for us, his mission statement, and we're gonna discuss it. So that way, you all can get maybe a little bit of insight into where we're at and what's bringing us to the podcast. So with that, Andy, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, here we go. So, as promised, I mentioned in episode 1, probably mentioned this too many times, but something started stirring in me. If you haven't seen episode 1 or listened to episode 1, please go back and listen to it. That'll make a lot more sense why we're using the terminology that we're using. This is by popular demand. I've had tens of people tell me that I've had tens of people tell me that I needed to present this. So this is titled Leftism, Woke Theology, and the Social Contagion Problem. I wonder if my family and friends are knowingly supportive of people teaching my daughter that she's a privileged white oppressor, benefiting from America's fundamental racism and evil, that boy and girl gender identity is subjective and fluid, that adult sexual fetishes should be celebrated by children, and that it's okay to kill a baby if it's still in mommy's tummy. But I don't know the answer to this question, and I'm starting to think it's because of my cowardice. That's my fault. Let me take a step back and explain. If I were to explain woke in one sentence, it would be something like, woke, the elevation of historically marginalized race, sex, and now gender identity groups to the level of the sacred. In other words, a secular religion. This new theology is quite seductive because it could be explained and understood in under 2 minutes. The answer to every question lies in seeing the world through the lens of the oppressed and the oppressor. It is not coincidental that this theology of resentment is a fundamental philosophy of Marxism and all the tyrannical, murderous, communist rule that followed. In Lenin's and Stalin's Russia and Mao's China, the state was essentially the religion, and millions died in these failed authoritarian experiments. As best as I can tell, here's how it works. The oppressor category. If you don't belong to a sacred identity group, you are inherently an oppressor and must atone. This atonement is not a personal sacrifice, but rather a bend of the knee and insistence that other oppressors must bend the knee. This makes you allied with the sacred identity groups and therefore a compassionate and moral person. This is an appealing way out for the oppressor because it allows them to quickly claim unearned virtues at no perceived cost. All you must do is admit and apologize for your privilege, stay silent if you disagree with leftists, and attack or cancel anyone who doesn't bend the knee. Any oppressors who don't bend the knee are bigoted, racist, sexist, homophobic, Nazis, fascists, driven by hate. All this is used as a cudgel to silence the opposition. Basically, shut up if you're white, conservative, or Christian. The oppressed. On the other side of this, if you are one of the oppressed, then any failures or hardships in life are not your fault. It's the oppressor's fault. In fact, any success that the oppressors have is achieved by standing on your back and is the equivalent to theft. Like Marxism, this is a theology of resentment. There is no shortage of Cain and Abel resentment in this world, so it's an easy sell to the victim of oppression. Literal and figurative reparations should be paid by the descendants of the historical oppressor to the descendants of the historically marginalized. But wait, there's a hierarchy to the marginalized. You must follow the power structures of intersectionality to determine your privilege level. Intersectionality, a term coined by the law professor Kimberly Crenshaw in the 1980s to describe the way that multiple systems of oppression interact in the lives of those with multiple marginalized identities, whatever the heck that means. The race and sex virtue structure are something like this. White men can't be oppressed, regardless of family origin or history. Also, they don't know what to do with the Asians because of their high rate of academic success. They don't fit neatly into the oppressed minority category. But pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. The race and sex group identity hierarchy of victimhood from bottom to top is number 3, white women. Number 2, black, brown, and native men. And coming in at number 1, black, brown, and native women. It seems simple, right? You can look at someone and right away you can know how historically marginalized they are, and then you can use that to explain any failures that they might have experienced and what they are owed. Please note that when decided by race and sex alone, these are immutable traits, which ironically are defining characteristics of racism and sexism. The soft bigotry of low expectations and the patronizing view of non-whites is cleverly concealed as compassion for victims by leftists. But there's a loophole. But wait, there's more. There's a loophole, because unlike Marxism, where people were divided by class, the woke doctrine divides people by class and identity group, hence the need for the virtue structure of intersectionality. This means that the most marginalized group is gay or trans black women. This power structure also allows for white men to be oppressed. Yay! But only if you're gay or trans. And somehow you move above straight white women in the hierarchy. Yeah. If you're thinking this is stupid, that's because it is. To make immutable traits and group identity paramount in determining an individual's value or merit, it's counter to the stated civil rights objective. In 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said in his I Have a Dream speech that people should be judged by the content of their character. Any rational person that agrees with Dr. King can see that judging an individual by their immutable traits or group identity is on its face prejudice and discriminatory. I would also like to mention that although it doesn't make it okay, having a dark chapter of slavery in our history is not uniquely American whatsoever. What is uniquely American is the fact that we fought a civil war to bring slavery to an end. Over a 4-year period, the Union Army lost 360,000 men during the Civil War. 320,000 of those men had white skin color. We can be sensitive to historical injustices without insisting that they define who an individual is right now and who we all will be in the future. In June of 2015, the United States Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriage nationwide. After gay marriage was legal, the left needed to gin up another fight, so they moved the goalposts. What happened next was so destructive and cynical that it would radicalize the left so much that previously moderate liberals, they're now actually right of center. They just don't know it. The leftists would make nuclear the already raging culture war and have their wedge issue for a generation. Corporate media, academia, and progressive politicians became hyper-focused on racial division, by exaggerating the widespread prevalence of institutional racism. But that still was not enough to defeat conservatives. They needed to broaden and coalesce the marginalized identity groups, increase white guilt, and silence the opposition. Incrementally, they would normalize all sexual lifestyle choices, fetishes, and mental disorders that involve gender. They would do this through the media and public education system and start at an inappropriate age. Then, when the basket of deplorables bitterly cling to their guns and religion, garbage conservative parents noticed that schools were teaching this divisive and inappropriate theology to their children, they would attack the parents as hateful, racist, sexist, homophobic, Republican bigots that would put you all back in chains and take the rights away from the Democrats' token mascots, the now embittered marginalized. According to Wikipedia, which routinely paints leftist ideology in a positive light, critical race theory originated in the mid-1970s in the writings of several American legal scholars, including Derek Bell, Alan Friedman, Kimberly Crenshaw, Richard Delgado, Cheryl Harris, Charles R. Lawrence III, Mari Matsudo, and Patricia J. Williams. Critical race theory, or CRT, is a social analysis that's grounded in the framework of critical theory. Critical theory is an approach to humanities and social philosophy that focuses on society and culture to attempt to reveal, critique, and challenge power structures. I won't delve into any of these individuals or their motivations, but I would like to point out that they are almost entirely made up of activist law professors, not sociologists or psychologists. CRT was more recently influenced by the extremely white race hustler and diversity trainer Robin DiAngelo in her 2018 New York Times bestseller, White Fragility, and historical revisionist Nicole Hannah Jones in her short story, The 1619 Project, published in 2019 by the New York Times. CRT opponents observed that CRT admonishes all white people for being oppressors, while classifying all black people as hopelessly oppressed victims. These concerns have spurred school boards and state legislatures from Florida to Idaho to remove CRT as a basis for K-12 curriculum. To circumvent these laws, critical race theory then joined with the gender theory that had been cultivated at universities, and it changed its name to diversity, equity, and inclusion. DEI initiatives then started popping up in K-12, university, even corporate America. The term LGBTQ+ was introduced to mainstream America as a coalition of marginalized genders allied with the black and brown people. Of course, there was no real coalition of alphabet people, just the designation of another sacred identity group that rich white leftists hope to use to keep themselves in power. Academia made mainstream the idea that gender identity is fluid during the Obama administration. The media was also happy to push the new religion. In 2007, Barbara Walters interviewed a 6-year-old boy, Jazz, who had been diagnosed with gender dysphoria, to discuss, air quotes, her gender identity. In 2015, I Am Jazz aired, a reality television series about Jazz Jennings, an American teen transgender. His parents transitioned their boy to a girl at age 5. And now they have their own TV show. As another example, I still remember watching the Disney Sunday movie with my parents after church on Sunday evenings. Now, Disney, one of the largest producers of family-friendly and children's content, is actively and openly pushing woke theology, including LGBTQ+ normalization in content specifically targeted at young children, including toddlers. What child or teenager does not struggle to find their identity, their place in this world, and what makes them unique or special? What teenagers don't struggle with anxiety and depression while coming of age and trying to sort out this wonderful and miserable thing called life? Psychologists in the U.S. are suggesting to children as young as 5 who are struggling to find their identity and experiencing anxiety or depression that this could mean that they are trans. Worse, in some states, if a child thinks they might be trans, a psychologist must affirm, or risk losing their license to practice. Worse yet, these same people tell worried parents of confused kids that if the parent doesn't affirm, then the child will likely commit suicide. The exact phrase that's used over and over again is, "Would you rather have a dead daughter or a live son?" As a parent, what choice do you have if this is what the experts are telling you? This is a truly evil lie. There are no legitimate studies that provide data showing a correlation between non-affirming or affirming parents and suicide rates increasing or decreasing among children experiencing gender dysphoria. And more importantly, there's no data to imply causation. Regardless of the data, school and social workers have used this lie as a justification to mobilize government intervention such as Child Protective Services, claiming that non-affirming parent is a threat to their own child's safety. Can you imagine your vulnerable child taken from your home by the United States government because your first instinct as their parent was not to lie to them, but to reinforce their actual biology and to encourage them that they are loved and just as they should be? People have said to me, this stuff is not happening. And if it is, it's anecdotal examples from the West Coast or maybe New York. And while that may have been true 20 years ago, these locations are the strongholds of modern leftist politics and policies. All the corporate media outlets are there. All the entertainment media outlets are there. All the social media outlets are there. All the most powerful Democrats are there. The internet has changed their influence radius, and the woke religion has metastasized. In the Midwest red state of Indiana, my daughter's school district sends me letters specifically addressing their commitment to DEI initiatives. And my daughter's public library has drag queen story time for children. Can anyone explain to me why grown men exposing their sexual fetishes to small children is good? Can anyone explain to me why Disney spends an entire month celebrating pride in adults with non-traditional sex partners? Why can a woke teacher hang an LGBTQ flag in their classroom, but a Christian can't hang a Christian flag in theirs? If you're unfamiliar with the use of the public education and media to ensure that children see the world through this lens of divisive ideology, and more importantly, vote Democrat once adult, here's some word salad to look for: diversity, equity, inclusion, or DEI. Social justice, racial justice, environmental justice, restorative justice, economic justice, implicit bias, institutional racism, anti-racist, whiteness, white privilege, critical race theory, safe space, microaggression, hate speech, personal pronouns, neo-pronouns, gender neutral, gender assigned at birth, gender fluid, non-binary, gender identity, gender non-conforming, misgendering, cisgender, birthing person, cisnormativity, heteronormativity, dead naming, polyamory, gender affirming, patriarchy, toxic masculinity, and on and on and on. Starting 4 years ago, my place of business requires that once a year I complete a DEI training course, not unlike the diversity training that Robin DiAngelo was providing for businesses before she struck it rich by writing a book trashing all white people. This is no doubt to improve their ESG score. Environmental, social, and governance, ESG, is shorthand for an investing principle that prioritizes environmental issues, social issues, and corporate governance. It's basically a poorly defined rating system created by the UN that has been adopted by the financial sector to devalue companies that don't bend the knee and don't demonstrate adherence to woke ideology. By 2023, the ESG movement had grown from a UN corporate social responsibility initiative into a global phenomenon representing more than $30 trillion in assets under management. The woke religion has quietly become tyrannical in its demand for corporate compliance. Here comes the rock, flag, and eagle part. We live in a country with "In God We Trust" printed on our currency, but our government and our media outlets are joined in an attack on all traditional values or morals. Nativity scenes in the Ten Commandments are removed from our courthouses. Prayers are banned in school. Christians are painted as bigoted, backwards extremists. Darwin's theory is fact, and intelligent design is flat earth. Government-mandated COVID policies closed churches across our country, while at the same time, politicians supported thousands of protesters rioting, burning, looting, and then occupying public and private property. Killing a late-term unborn baby is called women's health care. The medical sterilization and genital mutilation of children is called gender-affirming care. Children are being sexualized and groomed well before puberty. Pedophiles, now called minor attracted persons. Emails from elementary school staff have self-determined pronouns, including plural they-them pronouns behind their names. And when I say behind their names, there's no pun intended. I'm talking about multiple people. There are many examples of parents complaining at school board meetings about queer books in school libraries that graphically depict young boys having oral sex, young boys being molested, and other terribly inappropriate material. Parents questioning schools allowing boys and girls locker rooms and bathrooms. Parents that question the effectiveness of masking children versus the damage that was being done to an entire generation of school-aged children. Fact: these conservative parents were intimidated, investigated, and labeled as domestic threats by the Biden DOJ. One father whose daughter was raped in the girls' bathroom by a boy that claimed to be a girl was arrested for disturbing the peace after he presented to the school board the results of their social experiments. The father was arrested, but the trans boy that raped his daughter was protected and transferred to another school. Shortly after, the same boy was involved in another sexual assault in a girls' restroom at his new school. As Minnesota governor, the Democrats' 2024 vice presidential candidate wanted tampons available in the fourth grade boys' bathrooms. Is it any wonder that the easiest way for young people to make sense of all this nonsense is to reject their conservative parents' belief systems and adopt the new state-sponsored Marxist religion and accept the virtue structures of woke ideology and sacred identity? Indoctrinating children against their parents, tearing down the family structure, and making everything about race for political gain is, in my opinion, the root of the current demoralization and intense division of the United States. I do believe that many liberal Americans make their political decisions based on a sense of virtue and empathy. I'd even say that I understand why people think they're making compassionate choice. There's a constant lockstep of our media: ABC, CBS, PBS, NBC, MSNBC, CNN, Disney, 20th Century Fox, Universal, Paramount. There's a constant lockstep with a far-left globalist narrative. Side note, if you want to know more about that, check out the WEF agenda. Google, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and previous Twitter all use independent fact-checkers that claim to be transparent about how they're funded. After about 12 clicks and 4 redirects to different websites, when you finally dig up the, air quotes, transparent source of their funding, you find that Google, Meta, TikTok, and multiple Democrat-run organizations are the major donors to the group that funds the group that pay these independent fact-checkers. Sorry, guys, you're the source for funding. Playing a shell game with money before paying a fact-checker does not make them independent. Terms like hate speech, dangerous idea, inciting violence, disinformation, and misinformation have been perverted to justify the censorship and silencing of legitimate opposition on social media platforms. Because of this and the constant threat of cancellation, being doxxed, and demonetized, the modern public square has become an echo chamber of leftist groupthink. It's not enough to live and let live. It's not enough to be kind and tolerant of other adults' lifestyle choices. You must not only accept, support, and celebrate them, you must teach your children to do the same. Make no mistake, this political ideology is not intended to help the marginalized, but rather a vehicle to maintain power and control through encouraged resentment and division. Having opposition to these divisive identity politics does not imply hate, bigotry, sexism, racism, or any other slander that is used to silence conservative speech. I always try to be kind and respectful to everyone, regardless of where they come from, who they love, what their personal beliefs are. And I have no love for people who abuse positions of power. My grade school teacher wrote on my report card, "Andy has a very strong sense of injustice," and that is still true to this day. I do, however, reserve the right to raise my child in a way that I feel is best for her. I believe that there are objective truths in this world, and those truths have nothing to do with the way you feel or how you want things to be. I don't care what other adults do. Just don't push your confusing agenda on little children to seek affirmation or acceptance of your own life's trauma. Identity politics is at its worst when used to divide us to the detriment of our children. Children are being taught to hate their country, hate each other, hate themselves for the sins of people living 100 or more years ago. Children are being asked to understand and make life-altering decisions about their sexuality well before the age of consent. This manufactured tribalism keeps us fighting with each other while BlackRock and Vanguard buy our country out from under our children's feet. The two-party system in our country always leaves us choosing the lesser of two evils. The only way we can make that determination is if we see the evils on both sides. I want to believe that either through social media algorithms, liberal media bias, or just a lack of time and interest, that my loved ones haven't been exposed to the evils that I'm speaking of. Maybe they've just been overexposed to the narrative that there's no greater evil than the bad orange man. Why else would any of my loved ones want to diminish my parental rights, the family structure, or corrupt my daughter? There are plenty of things that I don't like about the orange man and Republicans, but in a fight to defend my little girl's innocence, protect and provide for my family, and just be a sovereign human with free thought, I will no longer self-censor to avoid being slandered or misunderstood. If I continue to remain silent and I sacrifice my child's moral compass to this woke mind virus, then I'm a coward, and my daughter deserves better. That's my motivation for writing this. I think if asked the following questions, most of my friends and family, regardless of their belief in God, would instinctively know the most reasonable answers. Do you think my 4-year-old is racist because she was born white? Do you think that normalization of adult sexual fetishes before children even understand the difference between boys and girls is appropriate? How many genders are there? Should boys be in girls' locker rooms and bathrooms? Are all straight white males part of an oppressive patriarchy? Do you feel parents who protest the sexual grooming or assault of their children should be silenced or arrested? Do you think the best solution to climate change is to make energy so expensive that the poor can't afford it? Are people entitled to equality, equal opportunities to succeed based on merit? Or are people entitled to equity, equal outcomes based on government intervention? Do most media have bias in their choice of stories to report, or do they provide a balanced reporting of the facts regardless of whose interests are aligned? Do you feel there's any point in time before birth that a viable fetus can be considered a human life? Should gathering to pray and offer literature to expecting mothers outside of an abortion clinic be punishable by law, including jail sentence? Should the CIA, FBI, DOJ, and White House officials be in direct communication with big tech and social media companies to pressure for the removal of content and content creators that threaten the prevailing narrative of the party in power? Is freedom of speech only for opinions that we agree with? And who benefits from the polarization and the division of our country? Please consider your answers to these questions the next time you are tempted to adopt a worldview from a Facebook post, assume a friend's motivation without asking, or attack a family member because Orange Man bad. As a father trying to protect the innocence of my child, just as my parents did for me, I can't help but question why my family and friends will not only pull the lever for politicians who consider my little girl as acceptable collateral damage in their relentless hunger for power and control, but then attack me and my wife if we disagree with those same politicians. That said, if I'm too much of a coward to speak, shine light, and explain the evils that I see for fear that someone will get upset, well, then I don't have anyone to blame but myself. This speaks next to nothing of my opinions on our economic policy, inflation, energy policy, border crisis, healthcare, entitlements, government subsidies, election integrity, foreign policy, military policy, national health organizations, Justice Department, intelligence agencies, climate policy, or taxes. And I have receipts for all the information contained in this document. Yeah. So there's that.
So there's that, yeah. That's, well, there's a lot that strikes me about it. The first question I would have for you would be, it seems to me like the impetus for you to write this was because of your daughter. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because of the age she is, because of everything that has been happening, I want to say over the past 4 years, but really it started in 2008.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
that's when the division started being stoked. And I was blown away because I did not support Barack Obama.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought, you know what? At least one thing good is going to come of this, even if his policies are a complete disaster.
They can stop calling everybody a racist.
Even if he's a complete ass clown. So how is it that after being voted in twice, how is it after 8 years, America is more racist
right
when we elected a black president
mm-hmm.
and then reelected him?
Mm-hmm.
It's completely absurd.
Absolutely. Well, and that's the thing, the absurdity of it all is always what strikes me. If you talk to anyone who follows this ideology, and if you ask them more than 3 questions and go from A, B, C, D, they just get totally turned around. It's totally incoherent. So you said that it kind of started back in 2008, which I tend to agree with. Were you paying that much attention to it? Or were you only semi-interested? And because it's not really affecting me, it's just kind of some fringe stuff.
I suppose I'd been red-pilled before that.
Mm-hmm.
There were just things that didn't seem right, that didn't add up. I don't think I was as educated on the topics at the time.
Mm-hmm. It just something didn't sit right.
It didn't feel right. At that point in my career, I worked in a lot of schools, so I saw firsthand when Barack Obama was elected that his poster was plastered on the walls of every school.
Open change.
In a way that had not been done before.
Yeah.
And overheard just the generalizations. And it made me think back to my schooling. And like whatever happened to all the styrofoam cup and ozone layer Aquanet hairspray and
I remember that.
All the stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought we were supposed to be completely submerged in water by now.
Yeah, right.
And so I just started thinking back to all that stuff, and I just thought, this is all a grift.
Mm-hmm.
This whole thing is a grift. And then Obama got in, and I just thought he was extremely divisive. I was like, how are racial tensions worse now than they were before?
Yeah.
So I tied those two things together, And I also saw firsthand, I saw the bias in the education system. At that point in time, I didn't know or think that I would ever have a child. So, yeah, I mean, when you're fighting for your kid, there's not much.
You won't do.
There's not much Papa Bear won't do.
Yeah.
You know?
That's one thing that it makes me happy to see is that families and people with kids are like standing up to this.
Enough.
I think that, you know, when you start indoctrinating kids and going after kids, it's something that's so evil, like you can't even really put words to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, my daughter is so sweet and so innocent. And she doesn't have all of the jaded things that I have. That she's pure. She's not racist.
Yeah.
She's not racist. And, you know, we live a fairly modest life. So, and I've played by the rules for the most part. I did some wild stuff when I was young. And
most people do.
trying to break in the music industry. I rolled the dice.
Yeah.
You know, I rolled the dice on some decisions when I was young, but I played by the rules. And we're not swimming in it.
Yeah.
You know, we're month to month. And I'm like, okay, I don't know where her white privilege is.
Well, I mean,
would someone please tell me where I can get it for her? Because I'd love her to have it.
I mean, because clearly you have more opportunity and more means than Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah.
I mean, that's obvious.
Honestly, it all boils down to nobody cares.
I know.
We didn't think when I was a kid, you'd notice, but nobody cared.
Yeah, I mean, we're the same age, and
You know?
it was the same. It was the same for me. You notice like those friends of mine are black, these friends of mine are white, but it doesn't matter. You know, we were all just playing basketball.
Nope.
It didn't matter.
There are white people that I didn't like. There are black people I didn't like. There were white people that I liked and black people that I liked. I mean, we just didn't think about it that way.
Yeah. And,
you know?
Yeah. And like I said, we're the same age, and that's the America that I grew up in, you know.
And I think it's the true America right now.
I think it is.
Honestly. I was talking to my drummer, and he said, it's wild, Andy. There's not cliques anymore. There's not like the cool kids and these kids and that. They're all just cool with each other. You know?
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I don't think it's real. I don't think any of it's real. It's all hyped. It's all hyped to create division.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that I think there's more benefit to the powers that be to have the rabble fighting with each other. You know, I kind of mentioned this in a previous episode. You know, I do a little bit of card magic, and it's all the same. It's like, look over here, look at this thing.
Right.
Well, what I'm really doing is over here.
I'm picking your pocket.
You know? Yeah. And it just seems obvious to me that that's the case. Also, once you really kind of take that in, and once you really digest it, it really makes you see our political leaders differently. You know? And I kind of like the way Dan Bongino describes it. He says, I don't get passionate about politics. For me, it's a spreadsheet. You're either a +1 or a -1.
Right.
And that's how it should be, because you have to understand that it doesn't matter how rich and famous you are or how poor you are or whatever. People are people, and we all have similar tendencies. We're all a little bit self-serving. We're all a little bit egocentric. A lot of that gets embellished by your place in society. If you're in an elevated place in society, if you're a weak person, you know, those negative characteristics are just going to get amplified, you know. So digest that, and you will start to see things differently.
You're saying people that are weak, but in positions of power, I think their insecurity drives them to look at the world in a way that's so defensive. It's very cynical perspective.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I'm no better or worse than a person than anybody else, and I understand the cynicism. I tend to have quite a bit of cynicism, which sometimes is a problem because I can tend to overlook people's good intentions. And that's the other thing too, is like, when people get into these bubbles, whether it's, the politicians in DC or the people in the ABC News headquarters building or just the media bubble in general, when they get into those bubbles, they start to think that the world thinks and operates exactly the same way as them. It kind of reminds me of, have you ever seen Apocalypto?
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting. This kind of, I don't know why this just made me think of it, but in the story, there's a tribe that lives in the forest, right? And then there's another tribe that comes in, takes them prisoner, and they march them off to the big, I guess you'd call it the city at the time. These are the Mayans. They take these people and they're either going to sell them as slaves or they're going to sacrifice them to a god. And these people are all chanting and doing weird stuff. And I looked over at my wife and said, see, even way back then, city people were fucking weird.
Well, that's an interesting analysis. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Because America is very much city versus rural.
Yes.
Any major city, what is that? Why is that? That if you have a population center, is it because they're so non-self-reliant? Is it because people in the sticks are self-reliant?
I think it's a diffusion of responsibility.
They're like, we rely on everybody else for everything else. And
it's the same reason why, the people who live in cities tend to be the most liberal, and they're also the ones who cry the most about climate change, but they're the ones that are consuming the most,
making the most
mess.
Yep.
And it's like, look in a mirror.
That's a whole nother episode.
Yeah, that is a whole other episode. But where I was going with that was, it was interesting to me that there were these different tribes of, technically they were kind of like the same group of people, but they were totally unaware of each other and unaware of each other's customs. So you could tell when they were taking these guys up to sacrifice them, like they had no idea what was going on.
Right.
Until they saw some guy's head get chopped off.
They're like, oh, that's what you guys do here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's like riding the subway in New York.
Yeah. If you make it on the train, you might get pushed on the tracks first.
Right.
So it just reminded me that, like, even 600 years ago, people would be in bubbles. It's hard to understand anything outside of that bubble. That's pretty dangerous.
Yeah, and DC is a huge bubble.
Yeah. The interesting thing, what they're talking about, is moving some of the agencies out of DC, like putting their, have you heard this?
No.
Like, yeah, there's some people that are talking about taking the headquarters of different agencies and moving them out into different states. So, for instance, like, the Department of Agriculture, why not put it in Iowa where there's farms? You know what I mean? Stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Which would be really interesting because it decentralizes stuff, it gets people out of their bubble, and there would be a natural attrition because some people will be like, what the hell? I don't want to live in Iowa.
Yeah.
So some people will just quit.
This isn't the power town.
Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of people will just quit. That could be something interesting to keep an eye on. But there was a lot in what you read. One thing that I wanted to ask you was, how long did it take you to write that?
So, first draft was about 60% of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was done in one sitting.
Mm-hmm.
I just started writing and I couldn't stop. I just realized I'd been self-silencing.
Yeah.
And there's a reason I was self-silencing, is because myself, my wife, my family were attacked by people that we thought were loved ones in 2016.
Because of Trump, or?
My sister-in-law, to my face, her uncle, her stepfather, literally called us all racists to our face. These are people that know that we're not.
Right. That's.
But they sacrifice all common sense for political ideology.
Yeah.
And there was something that happened that just broke a bunch of people's brain when Trump won.
Yeah. That's the interesting thing. I try to think back, like, what was it? I still can't quite put my finger on it.
It wasn't part of the plan.
It wasn't part of the plan, and I think that a lot of liberals had bought into the idea that the only barrier we have left is to have a woman president. Forget the fact that she's a horrible person. The fact that an established person in politics, such as Hillary Clinton, lost, that was like a trigger for all the people to come up with excuses as to why she lost, and the excuses being we're so misogynistic. And I think that vitriol transposed onto Trump because he was the one who beat her.
Yeah,
it's just an inkling that I have. I don't.
And it couldn't be that she was a terrible candidate.
Yeah, she's a horrible human being from all accounts. But
so I'm going to say something, and it's probably a whole nother episode to unpack it.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are people out there that work backwards, and they have a couple of different things that they work backwards from. One of them, I think, is atheism.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think there are people out there that have their single issue.
Yes, for sure.
And all they care about is smoking pot and someone making that legal.
Mm-hmm.
Or all they care about is
killing babies.
Killing babies.
Mm-hmm.
And then they work backwards from that spot to try to justify whoever they think is most likely to provide them with that thing. And the atheism thing, for me, that is real.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, there's a lot to unpack. Like I have a ton of theories on that and examples of why I think that. Mm-hmm. But I think it's resentment.
I think so.
I think it's just pure resentment.
It's like you said in your thing, there's plenty of Cain and Abel resentment to go around. Well, that kind of dovetails into the way that I see all of this. I almost at this point hate using the word woke just because it's been, I feel like it's been overused, but I don't know what else to call it. But I think this will probably be like an overarching thing that we talk about, drilling down on woke and what we think it really is and where it comes from. Mm-hmm. And I never thought about it the way that you explained it, as starting from an endpoint and working backwards. Mm-hmm. But I think that's right. You're correct that it's a derivation of Marx with sprinkles of postmodernist thought.
Yep.
But when you look at positions held by quote-unquote woke ideologues, you start to see a weird inconsistency, like we were just talking about, and you start to see that there's something that's neither progressive or conservative or liberal, right, about it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, first we would acknowledge that not all liberals are progressives or woke, but certainly all progressives, or those who call themselves woke, are some type of liberal, or at least espouse that they are.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So that being said, an example of a position that most liberals would have on war, for instance, which typically they're against in almost every scenario, at least traditionally. You would hear liberals use terms like genocide or unjust war or the war machine, so on and so on.
Pick your baby killer in the 60s.
Yep,
I mean,
baby killers. I mean, the guys coming back from Vietnam. Yeah.
Attacking soldiers.
Yeah.
As opposed to policies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
My thing is, if this is the case and is indeed the view of people of this persuasion, then why are some of these same people the most fervent supporters of the Ukraine and Russian war? And why do they insist that we must fund Ukraine at all costs when there's no stated victory goal on either side? So how can you be a liberal and just be for the military-industrial complex?
Well, it's because they've morphed. That you're talking about a traditional liberal.
Yes.
And there are many liberals that are still those traditional liberals. That's not who gets the press. And again, they're all working backwards. They don't even know
Right.
what they're standing for. They don't even know what they're fighting for.
Yeah, and that's like you see the Ukraine flags, when people would put the Ukraine flags in their bio. The interesting thing to think about is how these good-hearted, traditional liberal people,
Well-intentioned. Yeah.
well-intentioned people, have been taken advantage of because these extreme leftists call themselves liberals, so they all say, hey, we're all in the same group, right? We're all for the same thing. And they feel the social pressure to put a Ukraine flag in their bio.
And it might go back to something that you said in a previous episode about the cult of personality.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that conservatives, Republicans, whatever you want to call them, their support of Donald Trump is not a cult of personality. It's not about Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
It's about having low taxes. It's about having someone who understands the impact of inflation. It's about someone having a good place to raise their children.
Yeah, and
know?
the interesting thing is that you have these people that are so thick that they can't possibly comprehend it's not actually about Trump. Trump is the face.
Yeah.
It's just so weird because it's like these people can't think beyond step one, or they don't want to. Yeah, to me, it's just...
I just think they're more accepting of the cult of personality. Only
yeah.
It's not a personality for them.
Yeah.
It's this religion.
Yeah.
And if you're an atheist, there's a hole in your heart. You're seeking for something to make you virtuous.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeking for something where you can say, I'm a good person.
Yes. I think that's right.
You know?
And that kind of goes to where I think some of the origins of this is coming from. Certainly you're right that it's a repackaging of Marxism and some postmodernism.
Oh, sure, yeah. But why is it working?
But why is it working? And, you know, Marx got it from somewhere, right?
Sure.
Foucault got it from somewhere. Well, so all that being said, I would offer a different definition of woke than what you did. I don't think that they're opposed. I think it's just like a slightly different take on it.
Yeah, and honestly, this was just what came. I could define it so many different ways.
Yeah.
This is just what came out when I sat down.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I will admit, like, this isn't 100% my own. Tim Pool offered a definition that's very close, but it makes sense to me what his definition was, and I added a little bit more to it. So the way that I would define it is woke is the cult-like adherence to current liberal social orthodoxy, but is unmoored from any coherent moral or logical foundation. The cult-like thing is what's really interesting about it, because it's like you were talking about in yours. It's like, if you disagree with us, shut up and don't say anything, right? Mm-hmm. Or if you're in our group and you speak out against one of any positions that we have, you're out of the club. You're canceled.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like cult tactics 101.
It's very cut and dried. If you're not for me, then you are my enemy.
Right.
And that's why there's so much cancellation. They cancel each other all the time.
Yeah.
It's the snake eating its own tail.
Absolutely.
They will eat themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
They have to have someone that they can be better than. Like I said, it's a false, unearned sense of virtue.
Yeah. They can't come to grips with the fact that they're a bad person. We're all bad people. We all have the capacity to do both good and bad. And you can't judge a person by the single worst thing that they've done. Mm-hmm. Just like you also can't judge them by the single best thing that they've ever done. That kind of tells you what this is and ultimately where it comes from. And it is that this is a campaign of evil, both literally and figuratively, that on the surface promotes what we would think of as good things like tolerance and inclusion. Maybe you don't like your neighbor, but, you know, you're tolerant, you know.
It's the wordplay.
Yeah.
It's always strategic.
Yeah. But when then you go on the next level deeper, what this thing does is it's actually the exact opposite. It's a bait and switch. This will trick the well-intentioned good people into buying in. It gets the ill-intentioned bad people to buy in. So the weird thing is that now there's a coalition between good and evil. And so this leaves the good, well-intentioned, yet skeptical, discerning, and thoughtful people all alone. I believe that that is Satan's play of the old divide and conquer. You've just segmented all of the good people in half, and you've got half of them in your coalition.
Yeah. Honestly, it's true across the boards. I mean, I guess it might be a political cliche. We all have way more in common than not.
Right.
And so what they have to do is they have to boil it down to these wedge issues so that they can divide people and put people on different sides.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as the American people figure out that we're the good guys and they're the bad guys,
Yeah.
and that this is our country, not theirs.
Mm-hmm.
We are citizens.
Yeah. We're not some little puppet for you to
We're not
manipulate.
servants to the state.
They are
servants to us.
Yeah.
This is our country, and it terrifies them. That's why there are so many people that have such disdain that they try to mask.
Mm-hmm.
But it's obvious that they have disdain for the Constitution.
Yeah.
Because they don't think that we're endowed by our Creator.
Right. They believe that
They think they're the ones that allow us to
have the rights,
have power, to have control over our own destiny. They think they are the ones that get that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the downfall of every time that socialism and communism has been tried, that social experiment. That's the downfall.
Well, and it's the ultimate power trip. If you don't believe that your rights are given to you by God, but instead that rights are afforded to you by a power structure made by men,
Yes.
right? Then if I can get into that power structure, I'm the top dog.
You're on the good side of it.
Right. And it's the ultimate power trip. And power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's just too much of a temptation, I think. The way that I tend to see things, and part of the reason why I'm a little bit envious that you could sit down and write most of that in one session, I can't do that. I have a tendency to see things more big picture. It's kind of hard to explain. I have a hard time iterating specific points, but in my head, I can see all of these points lining up like
a tree.
Like a tree.
Yep.
under an umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
It's either a good thing or a bad thing or both. But so the way that I see it is on a larger scale. It's more of a spiritual thing that's happening right now. That could be one of the reasons why that you actually do see instances of church attendance going up. People are talking more over the last couple of years about their belief in God, and more people are coming into the church.
Being more accepting
Yeah.
of that. Oh, yeah. I mean, young men out there, you want to be a rebel? Be a conservative and go to a college.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to speak.
Yeah.
It's turned on its face.
It's really weird.
When I wrote this, it was focused. And that's why at the end I said, this speaks next to nothing of all of these other things that are also important.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to tie things together, and I was trying to do it in a way that was discernible, right?
Mm-hmm.
To someone that hasn't been following or just doesn't really think like me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to put them in my shoes as a parent. And basically what I was trying to do was incrementally go through and be like, Marxism, CRT, DEI, gender theory, all of these things are connected.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people that are getting on board. And that's why I mentioned the whole ESG thing and corporate compliance, all that kind of stuff. So I was trying to tie all that stuff together. It all goes back to the same place for me. And that is there are two ways to think about communism. When I think about communism, I think about Stalin, Lenin, Mao, citizens becoming enemies of the state because
brutal, dictatorial.
Absolutely. Totalitarian, right? But some people, traditional liberals, when they think about communism, they might think of a better world.
Yeah.
They might think of a commune.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why they call them communes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where everybody shares and everybody gets along and everybody this and everybody that. I don't know. This might be a little bit too down the wormhole, but I think people that believe in God know that man is not inherently good.
Yes.
We are fallen. We are inherently evil. And it's by the grace of God
that we're saved,
that we can be good.
Yeah.
And if you're an atheist, you don't share that.
Right. You believe the noble savage.
They think that people are inherently good.
Yeah.
Right? So there's this like doe-eyed optimism that is totally being taken advantage of. That's why you have people on campuses shouting terrorist slogans of Hamas.
I mentioned the Ukraine and Russia war, but it's also too like, these woke people, why are they in support of Hamas?
Yeah. It's because they're not grounded.
Exactly.
They're not grounded. I think that goes to what we talked about in our first episode, and that's you're not your own God. You're not your own God. The world just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. You brought up an interesting point, and particularly I've always thought about, the whole commune thing. And I thought you were going to go somewhere different. I thought you were going to go down the road, if you're a Christian, you cannot believe in a large form communism. Because one of the 10 Commandments is thou shalt not steal. Well, that implies ownership, right?
Right.
And if it implies ownership, then that means it's mine. You can't take it, right?
Yeah.
I don't have to share it with you.
So it implies merit. It implies earning.
Yeah.
And all of the woke stuff, all of the theology, it's not merit-based.
Absolutely not.
They're just looking at the color of someone's skin, and then they're making judgments.
Yeah.
Or they're saying you were born with twigs and berries or something else, and so we're going to make judgments.
To get into the whole kind of like the DEI thing is an interesting aspect of it. And you made an interesting point in your treatise, how CRT transformed into DEI. And I never made that connection before, but that's right.
Well, and it mated with gender theory.
Yes. Well, that I got.
Yeah.
But how it transferred into DEI, I never put those two pieces together. It was interesting how once you said that, I saw the whole morphine.
All the
that was the one piece that connected it, and now I saw the full morph of it. It reminded me of, so this should date this podcast fairly well for anybody listening to it. So because I'm going to mention the LA wildfires that are going on right now, and there's a clip going around from the Chief Diversity Officer of the LAFD, LA Fire Department. Have you seen this?
I've seen a lot about that, yes. And I don't mean to laugh at people's misfortune.
No.
This is what happens when you close your eyes and you vote for these people, though.
Yeah. Well, the interesting clip that's going around, I wish I had the clip, but basically what it is, you have the DEI Chief Officer of the LA Fire Department. I guess it's like a promotional video, and it's a black woman, and I'm also assuming she's probably lesbian.
I'm pretty sure.
So she makes the comment, when we respond to a fire, the people that we're helping, they want to see someone who looks like them. It gives them more comfort. I'm sorry, but hell no, I don't give a shit what you look like. Matter of fact, no, actually, I do care what you look like. Yeah. I want you to be a 6'3", 230-pound muscular dude that can carry me out of a fire.
Yeah,
that's what I want.
I want you to look like The Rock. That's what I want.
Yes.
I don't want you to look like me.
Yeah, please don't look
I
like
want you
me.
to look like me.
Don't look
I want
like
you
me.
to look like The Rock or Hulk Hogan or
exactly.
something, you know?
You know, I don't care what color you are, but be bigger than me. You know?
Yeah.
And then she goes on just almost directly after that, and she's talking about someone who may criticize the DEI policy. You know, a woman will say to me, well, you couldn't carry my husband out of a burning building. And then she says, which my response to that would be, well, it looks like your husband got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a burning building. That sentence right there tells you everything you need to know about these people who buy into this stuff. How dare you? I'll pull out my inner Greta Thunberg.
Oh,
how dare you?
How dare you?
How dare you?
We got to get that.
Yeah,
that's got to be one of our clips that we can randomly throw in.
That does need to be. But it's like, how dare you? Because there's a story of someone who died in a fire out in L.A. He had cerebral palsy. You're telling me that's that guy's fault? It's a wildfire. The guy can't hardly move. That woman has zero compassion for any other person. And that tells you everything you need to know about people who buy into this stuff.
It's so narcissistic.
It's absolutely narcissistic. It goes back to your point of it's unearned virtue. They want the virtue without having to do anything
without
to earn
the work.
It, without the work, right?
Yeah, guess what, people? It's hard to be a good person. Mm-hmm. It's not our natural state. We're naturally selfish people.
Yeah.
We're survivalists.
Yeah.
Think about what you would be if the grid shut down. There was no internet. There was no phones. There was no running water. There was no electricity. How long would it take before you said, I'm going to do whatever it takes, regardless, to take care of my family?
Mm-hmm. And that was the state of man until 150 years ago, 200 years ago.
Yeah.
You know?
Here's the thing. It's still the state of man.
Well, yeah.
We've just masked it.
Right.
We've just masked it with...
We've subdued it because we do have the luxury of power. We do have the luxury of basically food whenever we want it. Once you run out of your necessities, you'll see who people really are.
Yeah, we need to be saved. That's the thing. You're not a good person because of something that you do, or because you donated something to the Goodwill, or because you support a government stealing from people and giving it to the less fortunate. Mm-hmm. That does not make you virtuous.
No.
If you have no foundation in God whatsoever, I don't know how you square that circle. And I think that's what a lot of people are trying to do. Mm-hmm. You know?
Well, that could be an interesting thing that we could maybe talk about on another episode is what is virtue and where does it come from and how do you get to it? How do you maintain it?
I don't claim that it's something that I have. I just know that I know that this stuff that I'm talking about, it's not it.
Yeah.
I know that. I know that this stuff is manipulative, divisive, and I don't care who you are. You can't spend 2 minutes with my daughter and come tell me that half of this crap is true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it's a bunch of people working backwards.
Yeah.
They have this thing that they've somehow pinned on their personality. It defines them somehow. Mm-hmm. And then they have to work backwards from there. And that's how 81 million votes.
Yeah.
If you believe that.
Yeah.
The most votes of any president in the history of our country.
Yeah.
He's so popular.
More than Barack Obama.
Yep. That's how popular he was.
Yeah.
You buy that?
I don't.
So woke is race hustling. Mm-hmm. Woke is warmongering, but only when it's convenient.
Mm-hmm. It's unearned virtue, like you said. It is cult-like adherence to current liberal social orthodoxy that's incoherent. It's not attached to anything moral, because at least the true believers, like you said, they start with the conclusion of atheism, there is no God, and work their way backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And so it has to necessarily be unmoored from morality. If you talk to one of these people, you can ask them 3 questions that drill down on any one of their beliefs. And after 3 questions, they're in a logical fallacy or a paradox.
I think it's envy. I think it is resentment. I think it is a bunch of things, even the fact that they call it Pride Month. Oh, pride's a sin.
Yeah, it's one of the 7 deadly ones.
Yeah, and they're like, yep.
Yeah, we got it.
We'll call it that for the whole month,
Yeah.
It's a lot of stuff that's been cobbled together, and I want to make the distinction. There are people out there that just think, I want to be nice to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, inclusion, that sounds great. That means everybody's included.
Mm-hmm.
There are people out there that say equity, and they don't know the difference between equity and equality.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They don't know that one's based on merit and one's based on government intervention,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they're trying to do the right thing. And that's why I did mention that in there, is I think there are a lot of people that have the wool pulled over their eyes.
Yeah.
They're trying to do the right thing. Leftover hippies that when they think commune, they think peace and love and we all share and nobody's better than anybody else and all of these like grandiose ideas.
But it doesn't scale.
Unfortunately, it doesn't scale because man is not inherently good.
Mm-hmm.
We are inherently evil, and we have to be saved by God. You can't just will that to happen.
Yeah. I think that that's something that everyone has to come to terms with, and I think that that is the core of where we're at, and I think that people need to enact these values within their family structure. That's the only way that we're going to root all of this out. You're not going to achieve it sheerly through politics.
No.
You're going to have to weed it out through culture and through family. And that's my hope that, you and I can maybe play a small part. As of right now, I don't have any legacy,
Yeah.
I don't have the potential of any legacy. So this is me hopefully doing my part, and that's where we're trying to go.
I think you're right on the money there. And that's why they're attacking the family.
Yeah.
That's why they're attacking family structure. They already have the game plan.
Mm-hmm.
They already know what they did to the black family starting in 1968.
Yep.
And they want that to spread.
For sure.
Because if they destroy the family structure, destroy traditional morals.
Not only that, you've got an entire generation of government dependence. I see this ideology as something way, way, way up above politics. I think that these people use politics and the levers of government to achieve their ends.
Yep.
And destroying the family is one of their ends. And so if you can use the government to do that and make them dependent on the government, then you have them in the palm of your hand.
It's an unimaginable lust for power.
Unimaginable, that's perfect, because I can't comprehend it.
It's unimaginable lust for power that normal people, everyday guys and gals, both liberal and conservative, can't even comprehend.
Yeah, and
because it's so foreign.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I can't even wrap my brain around why the hell would I want all that power? Why do I want control of 100 million people?
Yeah.
What's the point? There's no point to it.
It's all ego and narcissism.
But I'm glad you said that, because I think a lot of people can't comprehend it. So it's one of those things where that can't be it. Well, just because you can't imagine it doesn't mean that that's not a real thing.
Yeah, and hopefully we're shining some light. I think that's what the past 2 episodes were. And this one is a good conversation. I don't know why I wrote this. I was just called to do it. The majority of it was one sitting, and then I read it back to myself, and I did add and make edits because I wanted to provide clarity that I couldn't provide just flow of consciousness first draft. But this is pretty much it. This is what's been pent up since family members and friends attacked my family, called us names that they know we are not. People that have known us our whole life, to where my wife is like literally canceled her Facebook page and just we just backed off. Yep. And the only people that we would talk to and tell the truth were people that we happened to find that were closeted conservatives because they didn't want to be attacked.
Yeah.
That's all over now.
Yeah.
I'm done with that.
Yeah. Me too. I
thought I was protecting my family by remaining silent, you know? Because this is not stuff that I still to this day am comfortable sharing with anybody at work if I don't know them personally.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I agree.
Or even hinting at that.
Yeah.
Because
you don't know.
Yeah, you don't know. I'm more afraid of what I become if I don't speak than what I am if I'm silent.
I think that's right on, because I think that ultimately one of the highest virtues is probably courage. And courage doesn't mean that you're not afraid. It means that you act in spite of your fear. I think that that's a call that we're both trying to answer, and hopefully we're getting there, and hopefully all of you out there can appreciate that. And I would like to maybe give you all a call to action. If any of this rings true to you, even if you consider yourself a liberal, but you feel abandoned and that you can't speak out, if you consider yourself a conservative and you feel like you can't speak out, if somehow you're getting this and you consider yourself progressive or a leftist, take some time to think about everything that we've talked about right here. You know, if you don't feel the conviction, if you don't think that this is a big problem, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I think you're wrong. I think it's a bigger problem than some people think it is.
If you're silent, you're complicit.
Yeah. And so I would...
And don't think that they won't turn on you in a second.
They will absolutely turn on you.
As soon as you have something that they want.
Yeah. My call to action for all of you is start speaking your mind. You know, share this podcast if you think that this podcast is worth sharing. You don't have to. But don't be afraid to speak your mind. Don't be afraid to speak the truth. That's the important thing. There's something deeper to truth than just 2 + 2 = 4. Tree leaves are green, right? Truth is something that drives us. We're searchers. It's why we're explorers, right?
And
the truth.
And we're not always right. We're not always going to be right. This is less of an attack and more of a defense. This thing that I wrote.
Yeah. That's how it comes across to me, but it's because I pay attention to the current state of things.
But if you were maybe involved in some aspects of this and you thought those were good things,
think about it for a little bit.
Yeah, just understand, I'm not attacking you. This is just a father trying to tell you,
here's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, this is what I see.
Yeah.
And you know what? I should be able to live in America and raise my daughter the way I see fit, she's not property of the state.
Mm-hmm.
And she's not property of anybody else.
That's right.
Yeah. When they say it takes a village, I'm going to choose my village very carefully.
You got that right. Well, I think that's a good spot. So, everybody, thanks again. For anybody who is a listener, subscriber, downloader, spreader of
truth,
thank you all. And we humbly request that you continue to spread the truth. Hopefully that would be by sharing our podcast. But spread the truth however you can. And we'll see you guys on the next one.
It was just a mission statement.